Hi, my name's Aaron Davies. I'm a father of a child who has Ebstein's anomaly, and I'm making this series of videos for those of you, you parents out there about to have a kid with Ebstein's anomaly, who are wondering, what am I going to face? What are all these terms that are being thrown at me? What's a cardiac catheter? What is the repercussions of having a cardiac cath? What kind of surgeries can I expect? Are they going to end? Is he going to be having surgeries his entire life? Or just all of those questions that you're going to have while you're in the hospital. And this is my first video in this series. And today I kind of want to cover the very beginning. Your child is born. They're in the hospital. What's going on? And I'm going to tell this from my point of view for my son, Nathan, who's had 6 open heart surgeries. He's had 21 overall surgeries to his heart, and now he's 3, and he's doing amazing. But he wasn't always doing amazing. I thankfully had my wife, who's a nurse in the newborn intensive care, with me the entire time, who could explain all of the medical terminology that was going on to me. And if I hadn't had her, I think that things wouldn't have turned out the way that they did. So here we go. I just want to give you a basic explanation of what is Ebstein's and a couple of the surgeries that he had early on, explaining why he had them. And these will be things that you will possibly face, and these are very common Ebstein's problems. So here we go. Here is my drawing of a heart. So I'll go ahead and try to draw what I think Ebstein's anomaly looks like based on what doctors have told me and pictures I've seen. So here's your heart. In the middle of your heart is a chamber. Is a wall that separates 2 chambers. This is the right side of your heart. This is the left side of your heart. I know that seems backwards, but it's if you think about it from you facing out, this is your right side, this is your left side. So when you're looking at any diagrams, the left side over here is always the right, and vice versa. The left is the right is the left. So this is the right side of the heart. The right side of your heart is responsible for taking blood from your body that's been depleted of oxygen, pumping it to your lungs. The left side of your heart takes the blood from your lungs, pumps it to your body. That's your basic heart. In the middle of your heart here, there's a valve on both sides. This valve here in the middle that separates the 2 chambers is called the tricuspid valve. The tricuspid valve is the valve that people with Ebstein's anomaly have a congenital defect of. So this is where your problem is this tricuspid valve. Just a couple other terms. This upper side here is called an atrium, and this is your right atrium. Down here is your right ventricle. Up here is your left atrium, if I could draw. And down here is your left ventricle. This doesn't matter. All right, so just remember, the atrium is the top, the ventricle is the bottom. This is your tricuspid valve. Don't worry about everything going on here, because your problem is this side of the heart. So in Ebstein's, this is like a normal heart. And what happens with a normal heart is blood comes up from the body. It goes into the heart here. Okay. It goes down through the tricuspid valve. Tricuspid valve closes and seals when the heart squeezes. When this ventricle squeezes, this valve closes. And the blood is forced into your pulmonary artery, which is, let's say, right here. The blood goes up, and it splits like a T, this way and that, off to your lungs. Gets oxygen, then it goes back to your left side of your heart here, and out to your body. All right? That's the basic makeup of how blood flows through your heart. So now, with Ebstein's, this is what it looks like. Let me delete this real quick. All right. So with Ebstein's, this tricuspid valve, the tricuspid valve is on this side. One of the leaflets of the tricuspid valve is displaced, which means it's lower than it's supposed to be. So it ends up looking something like that. And this happens in utero, so when the baby is in the womb. This is a birth defect. It's not something that you can get over time or something. This is a problem that you're born with. So this valve being out of place down here, what happens is the blood comes up and it goes into your atrium. It goes down through your tricuspid valve. And then when the ventricle squeezes, this ventricle here squeezes, instead of the blood going up through your pulmonary artery, some of it goes up there, but this valve doesn't close correctly. It doesn't seal. So the blood will instead, some of it will shoot up this way. And it will start just kind of swirling around between the ventricle and the atrium, causing like a whirlpool or something. This is bad. And this is what's happening to your baby when they're in utero with Ebstein's. Why is this bad? So this side of the heart has to, while the baby's developing, it's trying to push blood up this pulmonary valve, but it's not doing it very efficiently because the blood is swirling. So what ends up happening is that right side of the heart ends up working much harder than the left side of the heart does in order to pump the blood up the pulmonary valve. So just like any muscle, let's say I work my right arm harder than I work my left arm, that muscle gets bigger than the other side. So here's kind of what Nathan, when he was born, what his heart ended up looking like in our first echo. I mean, in our first. Oh, that is terrible drawing. Let me get rid of this. His heart ended up looking at this in the first X-ray. So over here was his right side of his heart. This is again the right side. Blood comes up through here. This atrium, the atrium here, became super huge. And that happened because the blood is swirling around in there. So there's a lot of blood on that side. The muscle became very thick. So if you can picture this as a muscle, it became super, super thick. And then on this side, you know, it's just like just like a normal muscle. Whatever. So that side is super thick muscle. It got stretched out because all this blood is backing up and pooling there. So when he was born, his heart took up his entire chest. If I showed you the x-rays, the doctors were just amazed by how huge his heart was at birth. And it was mostly this right atrium stretching out. So when he was born, and with your Ebstein's anomaly child, this will probably happen too. This is very common. What happens when they're born is like, how can they actually breathe, right? Like, what happens here? They have this huge heart. Why is having a big heart, I guess, a bad thing, first of all? So if you can imagine, this side of the heart is way bigger than this one, right? And when it pumps, when the electrical signal goes through the heart is normally sort of symmetrical, right? So it's all pumping at the same time, right? When one side starts to get too big and too strong and that electrical pulse goes through, you end up sort of getting rhythm issues, or you can get rhythm issues. WPW, I can't remember exactly what it stands for. It's a heart rhythm defect that a lot of people end up getting with Ebstein's anomaly, is because the heart ends up being huge, and the electrical signal ends up throwing everything off. You can also have other problems like SVT, which is your heart is racing really fast. Nathan had SVT a bunch of times, and he doesn't have WPW, but he does have a pacemaker from all of the surgeries he's had. So when a baby is first born on Ebstein's, Let me draw this heart one more time. You can picture they've got this huge right side of the heart, and that pulmonary valve, which is basically the, let me draw this valve again here. Okay, blood goes through here, and then it goes through this pulmonary valve, right? Well, when the baby was developing, because that right side wasn't working well, it doesn't pump very much blood through the pulmonary valve. So that pulmonary valve doesn't end up growing as much as it should in a normal baby. So with Nathan, when he was born, his pulmonary valve, which is the valve that brings all the blood to your lungs, was really, really tiny, like a pinhole. So the amount of blood going to his lungs was like nothing. So how did he live, right? Like when he was born, if there's no blood going to his lungs, how did he live? This is kind of the magic of the body, and I found this very interesting. So in utero, there's I like to think of it as like a back door. There's a hole in your heart called a PFO, which is open in utero, only when you're in the womb. Within a couple hours or a day of you being born, that PFO usually closes. What that PFO is it's a hole into the pulmonary artery that's up here. And so this blood that wasn't able to pump, it's just kind of swirling around in here, some of it ends up getting pushed through this PFO and making it to the lungs anyway, which is great. But now we've got a small pulmonary valve. We've got this open PFO, and he's born. This thing's going to close in like 3 or 4 hours. What do? So they let us hold him really fast. He's like blue, right? Put him on oxygen. Then they rushed him down to the CVICU, and they started him on this medicine called PGE, which you'll probably hear very early on, probably the very first day when your baby is born. We're putting him on PGE. PGE is a medication that solely exists for popping open that PFO and keeping it open. That's all it does. We were on this PGE for a while he was first born, and they kind of got him stabilized. He was on PGE. And then they decided, all right, he seems to be having just a trickle go through here. Maybe if we close off this PFO, maybe more blood will go through the pulmonary valve. So they tried. So they stopped the PGE, the medication, keeping that valve open. And as it closed, he started tanking. I mean, his oxygen levels were tanking. Blood pressure was doing crazy things. So they restarted the medication immediately, popped that PFO back open, and went, okay, well, what do? So PFO is the PGE is a medication you have to get constantly dripped through your IV. You can't go home with it. You can't take a pill once a day. It's an IV medication, so you can't live that way. So here's what they did. We ended up having our first procedure was a cardiac cath procedure for Nathan, which is basically where they take a wire and they put it through one of your blood vessels. And for him, it was his leg. They can also do it through your neck, from what I understand. But they went through one of his legs, and they run so pretend like this is his leg down here. They run the wire up through the vessel into your heart. Okay. And they brought it right to this pulmonary valve, which you can just picture. This pulmonary valve here, it's like tiny, and it's sort of closed, okay? So they ran it through the valve like a needle through thread, and at the end of this wire that they have a balloon, okay? What they can do then is they can expand the balloon. So once they got it through the valve, they expanded the balloon, and they popped open his pulmonary valve. Basically, they tore open the leaflets gently, right? So once they'd torn that open, they took the wire back out of his body, and they watched his blood flow, and now some of that blood was able to pump up through his pulmonary valve because we had popped it open manually with that balloon. That wasn't the end. That wasn't enough for Nathan. What they ended up having to do next was a second surgery, which was another cardiac catheter where they ran another wire up his leg. So we had popped open his pulmonary valve. The second thing they did was, so here's his pulmonary valve. They've opened this up nice and wide now. Now blood is flowing through it. But remember, this tricuspid valve here is still all messed up, right? Let's say it's like down here or something. So blood is still going back and forth between the atrium and the ventricle, all right? But some of it is getting to his lungs now. That's good, but it wasn't enough. So here's what they did. They did a second cardiac cath where they came in, and up here, they made a hole in his heart between the right and left side. They did the same thing. They dug through that wall, and they opened it with a balloon, and they tore a hole in his heart here. So what does that do? Well, if you can imagine, this side is all this blood is pooling up, and it's huge, right? So there's all this pressure building on the right side. Where's that blood going to go? Well, some of it's going through this pulmonary valve, but a lot of it's backing up into his liver and other organs and causing problems. You don't want your blood to go backwards. So they need to basically have an escape valve for it, which is what they did here. They made this hole. Now this blood, when the pressure gets high enough, can pop through this hole and go over to this side of the heart. That's a good thing, because now it relieves some of the pressure over here, and that blood isn't backing up into his organs. But it's also a bad thing, because that blood doesn't go to the lungs, so it doesn't pick up any additional oxygen. Now that blood is not totally oxygen depleted, from my understanding, so it does get recirculated around the body without going to the lungs, but there's some oxygen in it, so it is beneficial. And again, you've got this blood going up through here that goes to the lungs, but now we've got basically two pathways where the blood can escape, and some of it's going to his lungs, and he had oxygen in his nose to help as well. Those two procedures together helped us take him home for a couple months. And then things went much worse later on after that. But this was our first experience in the CVICU. And I hope this is helpful. I'm trying to think of other things maybe I can cover in this video before going on to open heart surgeries and other things that we've had. Like I said, we've had 6 open heart surgeries with Nathan. But anyway, I hope this is helpful. Again, this is Ebstein's anomaly. I know there's a lot of other issues. But I would say the most important thing that you need to know as a parent is you're your child's #1 advocate. We advocate for our child all the time, and we can do that because my wife is a nurse and she understands everything that's going on. One example of where we advocate all the time is these cardiac catheters. So we did these 2, right? And they saved his life, for sure. I mean, they got us to go home. They were a huge deal for us. But they had side effects that were really bad. So it's not a free procedure. Putting a wire up in your leg is not a free thing. But doctors sometimes will make it sound like it is. At least they did for us. So what we learned was when he would come back from cardiac cath lab and he'd come up to the room, his feet would be black, like black, and cold as ice. We would have to warm him up, and what ended up happening was, like, because they had put wires in his veins, it was blocking the blood going to his feet. Those blood vessels that they used for the procedures got completely occluded with blood clots. And we ended up having to we tried to get rid of the blood clots. They gave us these shots that we had to stick in his legs twice a day for 16 weeks. It was one of the most traumatizing things I've ever had to do to my baby. If you imagine trying to hold down your child and stick them with a needle twice a day for 4 months, it wasn't fun, and it didn't work. He still has those blood clots in his legs. From all of the cardiac caths he's had, he has blood clots. He's had blood clots in his neck, his legs, and that's bad because blood clots can move and they can go to your brain, and this is bad, right? That was sort of our secondary worry, though. Our biggest worry was we were starting to lose access for the doctors. So there's only so many large blood vessels they can use to put medicine in you, to do things like a cardiac catheter in an emergency. And if you clot those off and you have an emergency and you need this cardiac cath done, and the doctors can't find a pathway because you've clotted everything off, you're in big trouble. So one way we've advocated for him is whenever our cardiologists bring up to us doing an exploratory cath, sometimes we'll go to our cardiologist and he'll say, we should do an exploratory cath just to see exactly what's going on in his heart. I know he looks good, but I'm really curious to see the exact numbers of what's going on in there. We can put a scope in there and read exact values. We always remind them, he has blood clots in his legs from every cath. We don't want to give him 16 weeks of shots again. We're losing access, okay? Like, we can only do this a limited number of times in his life. Are you sure this is really the best decision for him? Or is this really an emergency? Like, do we have to do this, or is it optional? And if it's optional, we usually just tell them no. And they usually are okay with that too. But sometimes doctors will just suggest things and they're not really thinking about, like, you know your child's history better than they do, by far. You will know every little thing that your child does and all of your medication they've ever taken and how they reacted to every procedure. You'll be able to tell your doctor, hey, the last time this happened, it went very poorly, and I want you to convince me this is a good idea before I let you do it. That's your role as a parent, and you have to be able to speak medically in order to advocate like that. So hopefully this helps somewhat, and I will try to make other videos in the future with more of the knowledge that I've gained over the 3 years since I've had my Ebsteins baby. Anyway, hope you have a great day, and thanks for watching.